Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. I went to the bookstore and found the most radical feminist book I could get my hands on. I was shy to ask where such a book was, obviously, even though the women working there, they, let's just say, they are liberals. The way they look, you can totally tell. I was just shy because in Islamic clothing. Now, I found one, and it's titled, get this, Sexual Revolution. This is a story about how modern masculinity is killing the world and how feminism can save it. It's a story about sex and power and trauma and resistance and persistence. And at the heart of that story is one simple idea. We are in the middle of a sexual revolution, by Laurie Penny. Literally, look at the cover. And I figured if we Muslim women are going to accurately dissuade people from that path, we need to know what these women are saying. And we need to have the patience to deal with their nonsense. Because whether we like it or not, this ideology is being promoted by TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and you will not escape. No matter if you're hiding in the Middle East somewhere with no electricity, whether you're the Amish hanging out with your horse, doesn't matter. Ideas float around in the minds of people, and people travel and bring their ideas with them. So, I want to dig into this book. We'll take a pause on some of the other books because this one, when I keep walking past it on my bookshelf, I keep thinking like I want to argue with it. And we have educational books, we have fantasy, we have poetry, we have political books on the channel, we have nature videos, cooking, but we haven't really had a book that I would like to argue with, essentially. So go ahead and listen to this as you're driving, you're cooking, you're washing the dishes, hanging out with your baby, whatever fun thing it is that you're doing. So I usually skip over introductions because I find them to be boring and tedious and nothing valuable. I know that's rude to say, but it's the truth. But we'll do it with this one so we can see within the mind of this crazy individual. Alright, let's begin. This is a story about the choice between feminism and fascism. You know, everything's fascist. If I have a dog, I think, like in the future, like a hunting dog, I'm gonna name him Fascist. Just because I think people like the way it sounds, so they just say it over and over. It's a cliche, really. Everything's fascism. It's a story about sex and power and trauma and resistance and persistence. It's a story about work and who does it and why. It's a story about how you can track the crisis of democracy against the crisis of white masculinity. Now, here's something I want you to notice. There is a lot of racism towards white people. Straight white men. And what I find scary is that who's part of being white is Italians, French, Germans, Polish, Ukrainians. You know, there's a huge population of what it means to be white. There's some people from Spain who, in Argentina, when you see them, they look white, but they're from those countries, right? When you just look at the skin tone of a person, you're not getting the true essence of them, right? So this feminist is declaring war on all white men. And if you switched out the race, your book would be banned as hate speech. But it makes me quite uncomfortable with the genocidal talk we have towards white people. And it's disturbing because if you're truly not racist, you're not going to constantly harp on it. And as Muslims, we know that Allah created us in all shades, and we are not going to attack another Muslim brother or sister for the color of their skin. It's just not wise. and how the far right is rising in response to both. So here you see what she did, that if you support white masculinity of straight heterosexual men, you're already automatically far right, which is absurd. And at the center of that story is one simple idea. We are living, all of us, through a paradigm shift in power. Now, I would agree with that yes, we are living in a paradigm shift of power, relations between the genders, yeah, and us Muslim women. I get that some men, they heavily insult and degrade Muslim women who are online and say that they are not wife material and all of their nonsense. But it is highly important that Muslim women who qualify not like Linda Sorcerer, not to be rude, but not like some of these weird ladies on TikTok talking about their genitals and whatnot. Not that kind of representation. Not like Ilhan Omar. More of like a female version of Sheikh Albani, right? Just a very wise older woman who can help rectify the affairs of the young Muslim women against this nonsense. But it is true that the relations between the two genders with red pill and feminism is really warring, and families get broken in the mix. The world is mired in a crisis of care and of reproduction that is transforming society as millions of women and their allies struggle to build a better, fairer society, and millions of men try to stop them. Now, what's wrong here? Reproduction, she's talking about abortion. And she's lying and saying that millions of men are trying to stop them. So what does she do here? She's framing it as only men are trying to stop abortion, which isn't true. I want it to stop too. So it's not just men, and actually bad men, say, sure, yeah, execute that baby, I don't care. I'm gonna go jump to another woman, right? It's actually the people who have mercy and are good fathers who want the child to have a chance at life. Ironically, if men were saying, yes, execute your baby, do it, these women would say that it's attack on motherhood, and they would flip the script. It's quite insane. It's quite insane, but you see how her attack on white, straight, masculine men, and now it's attack on men in general. So she's already, within the first page, showing her anger and frustration towards men. The world, in other words, is in the middle of a sexual revolution. So a sexual revolution to this chick is executing babies. And for women to have zero sympathy, I'd argue. Zero sympathy. Because you're not going to call it a revolution to end a precious baby's life. It's not a revolution. That's a genocide. And it matters more than most of us have been allowed to imagine. It matters because sex and gender are not political side issues. They never have been. Sex and gender affect everything and everyone. They are, as theorist Shula Smith Firestone put it, underpinnings. I don't know who Shula Smith is. That means that any challenge to the social norms of sex and gender has to be ambitious. So you see what she's already getting at. Challenge to the social norms of sex and gender has to be ambitious. So they're letting you know that they have ambition. I want you to take a step back and think, what is ambition? What drives ambition? What does a psychotic feminist man-hater look like when she's ambitious? Her ambitious is on top of the skeletal remains of innocent, helpless babies because she wants to get back at men who are trying to stop it. You really have to get in their mindset. They can sugarcoat it as some grand glass ceiling, Hillary Clinton-esque propaganda, but to humble mothers who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't take glory in ending of life, except when it's a criminal, I'd argue. like a filthy, degenerate human being who's quite evil, right? Malicious. For example, if you want to end sexual harassment in the workplace, you must first redefine the terms of both work and sex. No. No, you don't. Because sexual harassment it's quite clear. You're getting arousing comments and doing arousing actions. And you're deliberately being sexual. Work is not sex work. Work is anything other than porn, I'd argue. I think she's going to try to say that sex work is real work, or some baloney like that. You don't have to say what work is. Work is work. It's self-apparent. They try to play these semantics about what words mean in order to confuse, and how much of either can be demanded from a human being against their will. Well, sex can be taken against their will, but when it comes to work, you applied for the job. So, you wrote your tax filing status, you went in and gave your resume, you're working in the village, you show up in your uniform, you willingly did that. You can willingly choose to be a vagabond if you want. You must be prepared to imagine a world where exploitive, exhausting work and joyless, coercive sex are no longer the norm. Now, here we go. Coercive sex is more common in the sex industry, alright? It's not really common in marriage. Only when you've grown heavily bored with your significant other, but you stay in it for the children. Now, joyless, joy is a very one noble thing to strive for, but I believe marriages have their ups and downs, and joy is a temporary emotion that comes and goes as it pleases, and it cannot be perpetually sustained. It's going to have a cyclical existence within your life. And exhausting work, well, let's look at that. People who work construction are exhausted. There's physical labor is all exhausting, from a fisherman to people who have to clean up a whale's carcass off the beach, people who have to do plumbing, tree work where people are taking down trees, working in the lumber yards, people who have to stay up all night grading essays in a university is mentally exhausting. Physical and mental exhaustion is just part of the life of this world. How selfish for a feminist to think that she doesn't have to toil. If the cheetah must run after the gazelle, and the elk must outrun the wolf, what makes a human think they won't have to toil as well? That things should just fall into their lap because they're a human. Hard work is rewarding. When I've worked very hard to make a wholesome meal, and I finally get to sit down and eat it, the satisfaction is much better than if I just heat up a frozen dinner in the microwave that was pre-made in a factory. It just doesn't have the same feeling to it. Modern feminism is intellectually, creatively, and ethically ambitious because it has to be, even though ambition in women. So here she's already telling you. Feminism is ambitious in order to get power seat. Even though ambition in women and girls is still considered morally suspect. Ambition to what degree? You have to think about. If you want to be a CEO boss babe, if you want to be a dictator, if you want to be a Daenerys Targaryen burning down King's Landing, well, yeah, you're going to have some suspiciousness around you. But if you have ambition to help with charities, you have ambition to have 10 children, you have ambition to help many women become better wives and better Muslims, well, there won't be suspicion in that, now will there? It depends on where you're allowing your ambition to direct you to, and toward what end. This book is ambitious because I would rather be ambitious than waste anyone's time. I've been a political journalist for 12 years. Okay, well, Okay, I don't want to read her little bio. If you want, you can look her up. Let's scoot down here. All over the world, women and queer people. There it is. There it is. You always see these feminists. They have to mix in some sexual fetish, some sexual thing in there. It's never just about women, it's always about sex. They're so heavily programmed in a hedonistic, gluttonous, perverted mindset that they can't stop thinking about sex. Like a dog humping a pillow. They can never think higher than that. They're stuck in that world. They have no God in their life. So they're just focused on holes of the human body and the orifices, essentially. It's really quite trivial and base and unambitious, I'd argue. In a hedonistic world, talking about sex is not ambitious. Not talking about it is actually ambitious. And queer people are rewriting the terms of social contract that was never supposed to include us. So the social contract always included women. It doesn't matter if you're queer. It's not some special thing about you. You know? Have more about you than your sexual fetish. And your sexual fetish mindset. Women of color, indigenous women, trans women, and young women are driving this change. Now, do you see what she did here? This is how they get into voting blocks. So there's plenty of Christian black women in the United States and Muslim black women in Morocco, Algeria, Ghana, who do not support the trans rainbow agenda at all. Indigenous in the villages of Yucatan, I mean, there are tons of women who are like, no. They're heavily Catholic. Right? Indigenous doesn't just mean you are licking a tree and painting your face red. Right? Those people have very specific gender roles. And interestingly, Matt Walsh, to his credit, went around to the tribes in Africa, quite indigenous, right? And asked them straight up, what is a woman? And they had a very non-woke, genderqueer response. So she's sneaky in how she's trying to get the racist tone in there. Right? There are white indigenous people of Europe. Right? It's fascinating how she's really trying to alienate straight people and white people. And grouping in women of color who, on average, if you did a poll, I've seen a couple, but the black community in America of Christian black women, they're not going to support that, right? It's very, very interesting. People got to do their research, but she's framing this in a way that isn't very honest. So we'll take a pause there because it's at 18 minutes, and so we don't want it to freeze, but we'll continue henceforth. By the way, if you'd like to join my blog, it's www.subscribestar.com/MilahanArchive. Supports the channel and helps me to buy diapers. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And for me to get protein shakes for my husband. Take care. Talk to you soon.